Winter on the high frontier could quiet a man's heartbeat if he listened too long. The land lay buried beneath a hard crust of snow, wind cutting across the plains like it wanted to carve the world into something sharper. On that bitter afternoon, Rhett Callahan rode with his collar turned up, breath steaming from both man and horse. He was a steady figure, practical, self-reliant, the sort of cowboy who didn't believe in much besides honest work and doing right by folks. That was why he noticed her. A lone figure moving along the ridge road, half bent against the storm. At first, he thought the wind was playing tricks, shaping shadows from white drifts. But then she stumbled, catching herself on her hands, and Rhett felt something twist inside him. No one survived long out here alone in weather like this. He nudged his horse forward. As he drew near, the shape became a woman wrapped in a threadbare cloak, snow gathered in her dark hair. Her boots were coated with ice, her eyes red from cold and exhaustion. She looked like she'd been walking for miles, too many miles. "You'll freeze out here," Rhett called over the wind. The woman lifted her head, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Leave me be, sir." "No chance of that," Rhett said. "You need a warm fire and a roof." She shook her head, a tremble passing through her. "I can't go with you." Her gaze dropped to the snow. "I bring bad luck." Rhett almost laughed, almost. But something in her face stopped him. There was no trick in her eyes, no attempt at drama. Just a bone-deep fear that didn't match the situation. As though she truly believed she was poison to anyone who came close. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maeve," she said. "Maeve Durant." "Well, Maeve," Rhett replied, "I don't believe in curses. Just people who need help." He swung down from his saddle, brushing snow off the horn. "Come on. Horse'll carry both of us." "No," she said again. "If you take me with you, something will happen. It always does." Rhett wasn't a superstitious man. He had seen enough hard years to know most disasters came from poor choices or cruel intentions, not fate. And leaving a woman in the middle of a snowstorm wasn't something he could live with. He held out his gloved hand. "Let me worry about that." For a long moment, Maeve didn't move, the wind tugging at her cloak like it wanted her to keep walking. Then her shoulders sagged. With hesitation as fragile as frost, she placed her hand in his, and Rhett helped her into the saddle. She winced as her foot slipped, but he steadied her. He climbed up behind her, guiding the horse back toward the Callahan ranch, its distant lantern flickering like a promise through the sheets of snow. But even as they rode, Maeve kept glancing back over her shoulder, as if expecting the storm to rise into something worse. By the time they reached the ranch house, night was creeping in. The snow had thickened to a blinding veil, and Rhett could feel Maeve shivering. He brought her straight to the fire inside, the logs crackling bright. As the warmth touched her face, she breathed out a small, grateful sigh, though fear still lingered in the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," Maeve murmured, clutching the mug of hot coffee he handed her. "I didn't want you involved." "You're safe now," Rhett said. But the words had barely left his mouth when a sudden roar rose from outside, panicked, thunderous, unnatural. The sound of cattle stampeding in the dark. Maeve's fingers tightened around the mug. "It's begun," she whispered. Rhett froze for only a heartbeat before turning toward the door. The storm howled outside, the ranch shaking with the surge of frightened hooves. And behind him, Maeve stared into the fire as though she already knew what came next. The cold slammed into Rhett the moment he stepped outside. Snow whipped sideways, stinging his face as he fought his way toward the corral. The ground trembled beneath his boots, cattle bawling, hooves churning up the frozen earth. It made no sense. They were settled for the night, penned tight, well-fed. Nothing should have spooked them. Unless something, or someone, had forced it. Rhett vaulted the fence, landing in a deep drift. Lanterns swayed wildly on their hooks as shadows of panicked steers surged back and forth. He shouted commands, whistling sharply, trying to settle them. Gradually, the herd slowed, confused more than calmed, snorting clouds of steam into the darkness. Once the animals were contained, he rested his arms on the fence rail, catching his breath. A stampede like that could cripple a rancher's season. If the fence had broken, the cattle would have scattered for miles. Behind him, the ranch house door creaked open. Maeve stood hesitantly on the porch, cloak wrapped tight around her thin frame. Her eyes were wide, filled with an apology she hadn't spoken yet. "I warned you," she whispered. "It always starts small, then grows." Rhett brushed snow from his coat, trying to keep his tone steady. "Cattle spook. Storms do strange things." "This wasn't the storm," Maeve said softly. He didn't answer. Something in the way she said it, too certain, too familiar, pulled at him. But he wasn't ready to entertain the idea that she carried disaster like a shadow. Not yet. Inside, he settled Maeve in the small spare room near the kitchen. She sat on the edge of the cot, hands clasped tight, as if expecting the walls to collapse. "You're safe here," Rhett told her again. Maeve didn't look convinced. Morning came with a brittle, pale light. The storm had passed, leaving everything quiet and blanketed in deep white. Rhett stepped out to check the damage to the barn. The cold bit at his face, but he was used to that. What he wasn't used to was the sight of his ranch hand, Charlie, limping out from behind the barn wall, hand pressed to his shoulder and face pale with pain. "What happened?" Rhett hurried to him. "Beam fell," Charlie grunted. "Snapped clean off. Missed my head by an inch." Rhett's stomach tightened. That beam had been fine yesterday. It shouldn't have given way, certainly not by accident. Charlie was shaken but able to walk, so Rhett sent him into the house to warm up. When Rhett examined the fallen beam himself, he noticed something strange. The fresh break didn't look weather-worn. It looked forced, if someone had pried it loose. He didn't say the thought aloud. By the time he returned to the house, word had already begun spreading through the valley. A traveling woman had arrived during the worst storm of the season, and chaos had followed her right through the ranch gates. Folks in small towns didn't need much to stir suspicion. And Jonas Burke was always eager to stir it. Burke had money, land, and a reputation sharp as barbed wire. He'd been circling Rhett's property for years, looking for the right moment to demand a sale or push him out. A whisper from Burke traveled faster than wildfire. That afternoon, Rhett rode into town for supplies. The moment he stepped into the general store, conversation hushed. Men glanced at him, then glanced away, murmuring under their breath. "Rhett," one of them said at last, "you know you're harboring a cursed woman." "She ain't cursed," Rhett replied flatly. "That so?" another man spoke up. "Burke says she left a trail of misfortune behind her. Fires. Accidents. Deaths. Says she's trouble." Rhett kept his jaw tight. Burke would say anything that benefits Burke. But as he rode home, the unease in the air clung to him like frost. Folks feared what they didn't understand, and Maeve, quiet, wary Maeve, was easy to fear. When he returned to the ranch, she was waiting by the fire, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked up the moment he entered. "They're blaming me already," she said. No anger in her voice. Only resignation. "It always happens this fast." Rhett set his hat down, meeting her gaze with steady resolve. "Then let them talk," he said. "You're not going anywhere." But in the silence that followed, he could feel the world tightening around them, like the first threads of a noose, drawn by unseen hands. Rhett didn't sleep much that night. The ranch had settled into a tense stillness, the kind that lets a man hear every creak, every whisper of wind against the windowpane. He lay awake by the dying fire, boots still on, waiting for something else to go wrong. Nothing did. But the quiet didn't bring peace. By dawn, he found Maeve in the kitchen, already awake, already packing the small satchel she carried. "You're not leaving," Rhett said. She didn't look up. I should have kept walking in the storm. You've already paid the price for taking me in. That stampede wasn't your fault. She gave a weary laugh, no humor in it. You think the cattle care about blame? Trouble follows me. It always finds the people who try to help. Rhett stepped forward and gently closed her satchel. Maeve, I don't believe in curses. Her eyes lifted to his. Then you're the only one. Before he could answer, Charlie hobbled in from the hall, arm in a sling. He sat heavily at the table. Reckon the whole town's talking now, he muttered. Burke was in the saloon last night, loud about it too. Rhett felt the familiar burn of anger rise. What did he say? That a witch came riding in with the snow. That Rhett Callahan was fool enough to bring her home. That the next disaster will be worse. Maeve's shoulders slumped. He's right about the last part. Charlie shot her a wary glance. Not angry. Not cruel. Just afraid. A flicker of doubt formed behind his eyes, the same as the men in town. Rhett saw it. And Maeve saw it too. The day unfolded with that same strained quiet. Rhett worked the pastures, checking fences, eyeing shadows, listening for anything that hinted at sabotage or accident. Each time something creaked or cracked, he tensed. But nothing happened. Late afternoon brought a thin, cold sun and a breath of calm. Rhett returned to the barn to stack hay bales. Maeve lingered near the entrance, as if unsure whether she was welcome but unwilling to hide inside the house. You don't have to stand out there, Rhett told her. Maeve traced her fingers along a stall door. Everywhere I go, people look at me like I've dragged death behind me. You haven't, Rhett said firmly. She hesitated, then spoke so quietly he almost missed it. I used to read fortunes, just for coins. Nothing fancy, nothing real. But then, things started happening. First, a barn fire in Copper Ridge the night after I warned a woman her husband was in danger. Then a mine collapsed in Winter Hollow after I dreamed of falling stone. I saw sickness coming to Pigeon Creek days before the first child fell ill. She swallowed, voice trembling. They thought I caused it. Everywhere I tried to warn people, something terrible followed. I don't understand why. But I know the pattern. And I know it's here now. Rhett leaned against a post, arms crossed, trying to fit her words into the world he knew. Sounds to me like you're not cursed. Sounds like you notice things others don't. Maybe you see danger because someone intends it. Maeve shook her head. I don't know what I see anymore. I only know someone always gets hurt. Before Rhett could respond, a shout cut across the yard. One of the ranch hands, Tom, came running from the far corral. Rhett. Got a problem. Rhett and Maeve hurried after him. When they reached the corral gate, Rhett's breath caught. The fence rails were half sawed through. Fresh marks. Clean cuts. This wasn't weather. This wasn't a chance. Someone had tried to break the cattle loose again. Rhett's jaw tightened. His pulse hammered with cold certainty. This was deliberate sabotage. Tom swore under his breath. Burke's stirring folks up pretty fierce in town. You think he sent someone out here? Rhett didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pattern was forming, too clear, too familiar. Maeve's voice trembled. This is what happens. Wherever I go, someone uses fear to hurt others. Rhett turned to her, the pieces falling into place. Tell me about the other towns. All of them. What happened? Who was there? Her eyes widened, fear mixing with relief. Someone was finally listening. That night, as the ranch settled into uneasy silence once more, Maeve told him everything. And with every word, Rhett felt the truth drawing closer. Not a curse. A man. A predator moving from town to town, disaster to disaster. And Rhett had a good idea who it might be. The night deepened around the Callahan ranch, the sky a black bowl scattered with frozen stars. Inside the small parlor, the fire hissed and popped while Maeve sat across from Rhett, hands folded tightly in her lap. She spoke slowly, as though each memory carried the weight of a place she'd been forced to abandon. In Copper Ridge, she began, I warned a woman her husband might be in danger. I didn't know why I felt it. It was just a feeling. A heaviness. The next night, a barn burned to the ground. People died. They said I cursed it. Rhett listened in silence, gaze steady. Maeve continued. In Winter Hollow, I warned a miner to stay out of the shaft for a while. He laughed at me. 2 days later, it collapsed. 12 men were trapped. They blamed me. Said I put dark thoughts in the earth. Rhett leaned forward. Did you ever see anyone suspicious? Anyone who followed you? Anyone who spoke to you more than once? Maeve hesitated. She sifted through her memory, as though turning stones in a creek. There was a man, she whispered. Not at first. But in the last 2 towns. He'd always be on the edge of things. Listening. Watching. At first, I thought he was just curious. But whenever trouble came, he disappeared before anyone else did. Rhett felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. Describe him. Tall. Black coat. A scar along his jaw. Eyes like a wolf's, sharp, hungry. Maeve looked up. I didn't know his name. Rhett did. Jonas Burke, he said quietly. Maeve stiffened. You're certain? Rhett nodded. He's been trouble in this valley for years. Wants every ranch for himself. Uses men who do his bidding in the shadows. If Burke was in those towns, his jaw tightened. Then those disasters weren't fate. They were planned. The fire crackled louder, sparks rising like tiny warnings. Maeve's eyes glistened with shock, and something like grief. All this time, I thought I was the cause. I thought I saw misfortune before it happened because something was wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you, Rhett said, voice low and sure. You saw danger because someone meant for it to happen. You saw patterns no one else paid attention to. Maeve pressed trembling fingers to her lips, as if trying to steady her breath. The room felt suddenly smaller, the truth closing in around them. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the shutters. Inside, the truth settled like cold iron. Rhett stood and paced the room. His mind ran through every moment of the last few days, the strange stampede, the sabotaged beam, the sawed fence. Burke had the motive, the means, and the cruelty. He turned to Maeve. You're not cursed. You're a witness. And that's why Burke wants you shoved out of every place you go. If people realized he was behind those disasters, they'd turn on him, Maeve murmured. They'd hang him. Rhett stopped pacing. Exactly. Maeve stared at the flames, and her voice softened. I've lived with fear for so long, I didn't recognize the truth even when it stood in front of me. Rhett rested a hand on the back of her chair. You're safe here. I'll see to that. But even as he said it, he knew the threat was tightening. Burke wasn't the type to whisper rumors and walk away. If Maeve held knowledge that could destroy him, he'd move to silence her. The next morning, that fear proved true. Rhett stepped out onto the porch and saw movement near the tree line, 2 riders watching the ranch, then turning their horses and disappearing into the pines. Scouts. Burke's men. Testing the ground. When he came back inside, Maeve stood waiting, face pale. They were here, weren't they? She asked. Rhett didn't bother denying it. Burke won't stop with rumors. If he wants this ranch, and wants you gone, he'll try something bigger. Maeve wrapped her arms around herself. Then I should leave. I won't be the reason your home burns down around you. Rhett stepped closer, voice firm. You're not leaving. I don't abandon people who need protection. And I don't run from men like Burke. Maeve held his gaze, something fragile and fierce mixing in her eyes. Outside, the wind shifted again, an omen of the trouble rising in the valley. And Rhett knew the time for waiting was over. The storm ahead would be human-made. And far more dangerous than any winter wind. The Callahan Ranch woke under a silver-gray sky, the kind that made the cold feel sharper than the day before. Frost clung to every fence rail, and the wind carried a stillness that didn't feel natural. It felt like the breath held before a blow. Rhett spent the morning checking on his men. Or rather, the men he still had. 2 ranch hands had already quit before sunrise, saddling their horses in tense silence. They avoided Rhett's eyes, avoided Maeve entirely, muttering that they wouldn't stay on a ranch, harboring a curse. Another handed in his pay and rode off without a word. By noon, nearly half the crew was gone. Rhett stood in the yard, watching dust kick up behind the last departing rider. The empty corrals looked suddenly larger, lonelier, like pieces of a life slowly being carved away. Maeve stepped onto the porch behind him. She didn't speak, she didn't have to. She could see the loss etched across his shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Rhett didn't turn. "They didn't leave because of you." "Yes," Maeve whispered, "they did." He exhaled long and slow, a cloud drifting into the cold air. "They left because Burke's been poisoning ears for years. They left because fear's easier to swallow than truth." Maeve walked down the steps, her cloak trailing in the snow. "Fear follows me everywhere, Rhett. You don't have to pretend otherwise." Rhett finally faced her, and what she saw wasn't anger, but stubborn resolve. "Fear isn't the same as guilt, Maeve. And I'm not letting you believe you deserve any of this." Before she could answer, Tom came rushing from the barn. "Rhett." Supplies just vanished from the tack room. Rope, feed, even the spare rifle. Rhett's jaw nodded. "Vanished? Or taken?" Tom hesitated. The door wasn't forced. Whoever did it had a key, or knew where the spare was kept. Rhett glanced toward the empty bunkhouse, the missing horses. Men he'd once trusted. Burke had his fingers deeper in the valley than Rhett realized. Maeve stepped closer. "He's weakening you. Piece by piece." "Trying to," Rhett said. "But he hasn't won." Tom cleared his throat. "If more hands leave, we won't be able to keep up with winter work. We'll be spread too thin." Rhett looked toward the hills where the scouts had disappeared. "Burke's making sure of that. He wants this place to fall apart before spring." Inside the house, Maeve paced the small parlor, cloak swirling around her. She moved like someone searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "He'll push until you break," she said. "And I don't want to watch that happen because of me." Rhett stepped in front of her. "Maeve, look at me." She lifted her eyes. "You are not the reason Burke's doing this. You didn't cause the stampede. You didn't see the fence. You didn't drop that beam on Charlie. Burke's been after my land long before he knew your name." Maeve's breath trembled. "But now I've given him another weapon. The town believes his story. His lies. They think I'm cursed." Rhett shook his head. "Then we show them the truth." A flicker of hope and fear mixed in her expression. "How?" "We start by staying ahead of him. Watching the ranch, watching the men, he moves around. And you," he touched her arm gently, "you stay here. Where can I protect you?" She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't burden yourself with me." "It's not a burden." His voice softened, surprising even himself. "You deserve a place where people don't run from you. Where someone stands up for you." Tears glimmered but didn't fall. Maeve turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Every time I settle somewhere, someone gets hurt. I can't let that happen here. To you." "You're not running," Rhett said quietly. Not again. It was a promise. A vow that settled heavy in the air between them. But outside, trouble was already creeping closer. That evening, Rhett discovered the south fence cut clean through and boot prints leading toward the river. Fresh ones. More than one pair. At the same time, Tom found the water trough poisoned with something foul-smelling, enough to sicken cattle if they drank from it. Burke wasn't just stirring fear. He was tightening the trap. Maeve watched Rhett from the doorway as he examined the tracks, the poison, the damage. Snow swirled around him, catching in his hair and beard like frost. She whispered, almost to herself, "I should leave tonight." But Tom overheard and stepped closer. "If you go now, Burke wins. And Rhett loses everything." Maeve stared at the ground, the conflict tearing through her. Across the yard, Rhett straightened and looked toward the distant ridge, toward Burke's land. His voice carried through the cold wind. "This ends soon. One way or another." But deep down, he feared the next move in Burke's plan. Because men like Jonas Burke didn't stop at rumors or sabotage. They escalated. Maeve tried to wait until dawn to slip away. She sat by the cold hearth, cloak wrapped tightly around her, listening to Rhett and Tom move about the ranch, checking locks, reinforcing doors, posting lanterns along the yard. Burke's men were growing bolder, and fear had settled into every crack of the old house. Maeve watched the shadows dance on the wooden floor. Every instinct in her begged her to run, disappear into the snow before she brought more ruin down on the man who'd shown her nothing but kindness. When the house fell quiet and the wind turned gentle for the first time in days, she stood and lifted her satchel. But before she reached the door, a voice came from the dark hallway. "Don't." Rhett stepped into the lamplight, boots unlaced, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired in a way that went far deeper than lack of sleep. But his expression held something steady, unshaken. Maeve froze. "I can't stay here, Rhett. I won't let Burke destroy you just to get to me." Rhett walked closer, each step measured and calm. "If you leave, he wins. And everything he's done will be buried. The truth dies with you." "I don't matter as much as this ranch," she whispered. "As your men, your land, your life." Rhett's jaw flexed. "Maeve, look at me." She did. "You matter more than you think. And I won't let the man who hunted you across half the frontier win by fear. Not while I'm breathing." Her voice shook. "You don't understand what follows me." "I understand exactly what follows you," Rhett said. "A man with a long memory for cruelty and a short fuse for anyone who can expose him." Maeve closed her eyes, despair pulling at her. "I've been running for so long, I don't know how to stop." Rhett reached out, not grabbing, just resting a warm hand lightly on her arm. "Then let me help you stop." That simple touch, gentle, steady, broke something inside her. Not pain. Not fear. A kind of relief she hadn't felt in years. But before she could speak, a pounding sounded from outside. Tom burst in through the back door. "Rhett. You need to see this." They stepped onto the porch. The wind carried the low groan of wood straining under pressure. The back barn door hung crooked, as if someone had rammed it with a shoulder or boot. Snow around it was churned up, fresh tracks, multiple sets. Tom held up a torn scrap of dark cloth caught on a hinge. "Riders. At least 3. They circled the barn and headed for the ridge." Rhett cursed under his breath. "Testing the defenses. Making sure we're awake." Tom glanced toward the tree line. "They'll be back." Maeve hugged her arms to her chest. "Rhett, he won't stop. Burke won't let me live free. He won't let you keep this ranch. Leaving is the only way to keep you safe." Rhett turned to her with a resolve that could have cut stone. "You're not running. Not tonight. Not ever again." Something in his tone, steady, unwavering, finally silenced her arguments. Tom cleared his throat gently. "Rhett, there's more." He led them into the barn. On the far wall, carved deep into the wood with a knife, were 5 words. "She leaves, or you lose." The message wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Maeve trembled. Rhett stepped in front of her, as if the carved words themselves could hurt her. Tom exhaled slowly. "This is Burke tellin' you your time's up." Rhett stared at the message, eyes narrowing. "No. This is Burke telling me he's running out of ways to scare us. And when a bully runs out of fear to throw around." Tom nodded grimly. "He starts a fight." Rhett faced Maeve. "If you leave now, he'll come after you alone. If you stay, we fight this together." Maeve's breath caught. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." Rhett shook his head. "Then trust me. Trust that we can end this." It was the second major turning point, the moment she had to choose. Flee again into a life of shadows, or stand with the only person who'd ever looked past the fear surrounding her. Maeve stepped closer to him, her voice barely audible. "All right. I trust you." Rhett felt the shift, quiet but powerful, like the wind changing direction before a storm. And that shift came just in time. Because as the last light faded behind the hills, Rhett discovered something hidden inside the barn loft, a scrap of paper tucked between boards, marked with a crude map. A map showing exactly how Burke planned to take the ranch. And exactly when. The prairie night felt like a held breath, cold, sharp, and full of invisible watchers. Lila clutched the saddle horn, knuckles pale in the moonlight, as Cole guided their horses along the dry creek bed that ran south. The ground dipped and rose like the back of some great sleeping creature, shadows swallowing them whole one moment and spitting them back into silver glow the next. Behind them, the fire at Mercy Ridge smoldered against the horizon. Smoke drifted low, caught in the night air like a torn veil. Cole didn't look back. Lila tried not to. She failed. Her eyes stung as she whispered, "I didn't mean for them to lose their homes." Cole's jaw ticked. "You didn't. They chose their anger. You didn't ask for any of this. But it happened because of me." He slowed his horse enough to lean over and touch her wrist, quick, grounding. "It happened because Maddox Pierce wanted someone to blame. You just made it convenient." Lila swallowed. The knot inside her refused to loosen. She had brought bad luck to every place she touched. She said it the day they met. He hitched his horse anyway. And now a town lay in smoke. Cole scanned the dark. "Cut through those cottonwoods. We'll rest there." They dismounted beneath a tangle of trees that bowed over the creek. Crickets hummed, an owl hooted low and mournful. Lila rubbed her arms, feeling the cold hit now that adrenaline had burned off. Cole gathered dead branches without speaking. The small fire he built was weak, more ember than flame, but enough to warm their hands. No light could be seen from afar. Lila finally murmured, "Cole, if staying with me is going to ruin your life, you should leave. Now. Before Pierce's men catch up." He stared into the faint glow, shadows carving deep lines across his cheek. "That's what you think I am? Someone who cuts and runs?" "No," she admitted. "I think you're good. Too good to let me drag you down with me." Cole exhaled slowly, then shifted close enough that she could feel the heat from him even without touching. "Listen to me, Lila. You don't bring bad luck. You bring change. People don't like change, it shakes the mud off the things they've been ignoring." His eyes lifted to hers. "You didn't burn that town. You didn't cause Maddox Pierce to be a bully hiding behind a badge. You didn't make those men cowards." Her lips trembled. "But you got hurt. You lost your place there." "I never belonged there," he said simply. She froze. He drew a long breath, voice lower now. "Before you came along, I'd been drifting. Fixing fences, tending horses, breaking up fights. That's not a life. That's just passing time. You made me choose something for once, choose someone. That isn't bad luck. That's the direction. Her chest tightened, but for the first time that night, the knot shifted, loosening, not tightening. But there was more. He wasn't finished. Cole shifted and took her hands, both of them, warm and rough and steady. If you're asking whether I want to leave, no. If you're asking whether I regret staying, not for a second. And if you're asking whether I'm scared. He huffed a soft breath. Only scared of losing you. The words hit her harder than any gunshot could have. She didn't know when her tears began to fall, only that Cole's thumb brushed one away before it dropped. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched, breath mingling with the night chill. Lila squeezed his hands back, her whisper barely a breath. I don't want to lose you either. A twig snapped somewhere in the dark. Cole's head jerked up. He extinguished the small fire with one sweep of dirt and was on his feet with his revolver drawn. Lila's pulse thundered in her ears. Voices drifted faintly through the cottonwoods. Pierce's men. Cole grabbed Lila's hand, his voice low but steady. Time to run. Stay close. They fled deeper into the trees, branches whipping past, the night swallowing their silhouettes. Together. As always now. Because dawn, or danger, would find them side by side. Dawn crept along the horizon like a blade of pale gold, slicing open the night. Lila and Cole crouched behind a line of jagged rock formations, breath steaming into the cold air. They had ridden hard through the cottonwoods, across a gully, and up into the foothills overlooking the valley. Below them, Pierce's riders fanned out in frustrated circles, searching. Cole watched their patterns, eyes narrowed. They're guessing now. That means we bought time. Lila hugged her arms, shivering from more than cold. They won't stop. Not while I'm alive. Cole turned to her. Then we make a stand where it counts. His tone was iron, but not reckless. Just decided, fully, finally. Lila's heartbeat thudded. A stand? Just the two of us? No, Cole said, gaze drifting toward the far side of the valley. We take it to Pierce himself. End it at the source. She stared at him as realization dawned. You want to go back? His jaw flexed. We cleared your name. Mine. And the truth gets told where everyone can hear it. He placed his hand over hers. Running only works if you've got somewhere to run to. You deserve more than that. Something inside her steadied, like a door closing on fear and opening on resolve. Then we ride. By late morning, Mercy Ridge shimmered in the heat, wounded but alive. Smoke still curled from collapsed roofs, but townsfolk gathered in the street, talking in hushed clusters. No one saw Cole and Lila approach until they were already halfway down the main road. The murmur rose like wind catching dry grass. There she is. Pierce said she started the fire. That cowboy's got some nerve. Cole dismounted, then helped Lila down. His voice carried across the street when he spoke. Where's Maddox Pierce? The sheriff, or the man wearing the badge, stepped out from the charred remains of the saloon veranda. His hat was soot-stained. His expression curdled as though he'd swallowed a burr. Well, Pierce drawled. The drifter and his curse of a woman. Town will be mighty relieved to see justice done proper. Cole didn't reach for his gun. He didn't need to. His stance alone was a warning. You set that fire, Pierce, Cole said. Trying to pin it on her because she turned you down. A ripple went through the crowd. Pierce scoffed. You got proof. Lila stepped forward before Cole could answer. Her voice was clear. Not loud, but it reached every ear. I do. She pointed toward the stable keeper, Jasper Dell, who shrank back under the sudden attention. You told me Maddox threatened to burn my things if I didn't learn my place. You said it when you helped me pack. I never forgot. The crowd turned. Jasper swallowed hard. Sheriff told me to say it, he muttered. Said she needed blammin'. Said folks listened to him if there was a fire involved. A shock of silence rolled through Mercy Ridge. Pierce's hand twitched toward his holster. Boy, you better shut. Cole moved in one heartbeat, gun drawn, stance braced, voice a thunderclap. Don't. Every man in town suddenly remembered that Cole Varon, quiet as he was, had once been the fastest shot between the Rio and the Northern Strip. Pierce froze. Lila stepped beside Cole, chin lifted. It ends here, Maddox. The sheriff's eyes darted between the crowd, the exposed truth, and Cole's unwavering aim. His shoulders sagged, just enough that the fight left him. Two ranchers stepped forward, wrenching the badge from his vest. Someone spat in the dirt near his boots. The crowd's attention shifted, slowly, but undeniably, toward Lila. A woman called out, "You saved Mrs. Danvers's boy in the blizzard." Another murmured, "And she nursed old Ben back from fever. Maybe she ain't cursed after all." Cole holstered his gun only once the townsfolk dragged Pierce away. Dust settled. Quiet swelled. He turned to Lila. "You okay?" A long breath left her. For the first time, yes. Her eyes shone, not with fear, but with certainty. "Cole," she whispered, voice trembling in a new way. "Maybe I'm not bad luck. Maybe I just needed someone who'd stay long enough to see past it." He smiled, soft and sure. "I'm not going anywhere." Around them, Mercy Ridge shifted, from suspicion to acceptance, from distance to hesitant warmth. But Lila saw only him. And together, in the middle of a scarred street beneath the new sun, they began something neither fire nor fear could burn away. If you loved this story of courage and love on the frontier, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a Wild West adventure.